I guess we can have a little bit of air.
No, everybody was fine. I was just kind of stuck. I'm not hot, I'm just like stuck.
Yeah, but I just turned that on, but if it's showing 75 and you that in, I think it's low enough to kick it on here. We'll let everybody get set and then we'll get going. So we're still going to be talking about the second coming tonight, so be an exciting lesson, I'm sure. Still got some filter in. All right, so how is everybody tonight? All right.
Good.
All right. It's always my pleasure and a treat to be with you, of course. And as you know, we're still studying the second coming. We talked about the coming of the kingdom and the second coming of Christ, which is our real topic, divided in two. And we've been doing it for about 7 months now, right? Mm-hmm. That's how much the Bible talks about this topic and how relevant it is to our everyday living. So what we'll do, we're going to continue on and study Matthew 24. Remember, Matthew 24 is key to understanding the second coming. If you mess up Matthew 24, you've messed up everything. And so you have to understand how to interpret Matthew 24, which Jesus talks about his second coming, what would happen before the end of the world, and what would happen in the Roman invasion. So remember Matthew 24, those are 3 questions that he's answering, right? Remember what? The destruction of Jerusalem, meaning the Roman invasion, right? He's talking about the second coming, and he's talking about what would happen before the end of the world. And so in order to keep it straight, we got to understand which question he's answering at specific times. Remember that? Make sense to you? Mm-hmm. All right. Let's go on with it then and get to where we ended up last time. So if you want to, go ahead and get ahead of me and go to Matthew 24. I think we're around verse number 7, if I'm not mistaken. Almost there. This computer's running a little bit slow, but we'll get there. There we go. Let's one kick in now. All right. So again, that Matthew 24 verse 3 is the disciples saying what? Tell us when shall these things be, right? Which was the destruction of Jerusalem. And what shall be the sign of thy coming? In other words, what's going to happen when you come back? And of the what? End of the world. Okay, so that sets the tone for the whole chapter. All right. Now we're into Matthew chapter 24. Now remember, we started talking about the persecution or the mistreatment, the evils that will befall the church, really, in all Christians, which the Christians are the church, right? Remember, the church is not the building, but the church is what? The people. The people, right? We are literally the temple of God from a spiritual standpoint, right? All right, so God was saying that there's some things that's going to happen to us, starting with the apostles, all the way to the end of time, which would be the second coming of Christ. All right? How many of you have studied Christian persecution outside of the Bible? Have you ever read any of the history books that talk about it? The Catholics. The Catholics do a lot of writing on that. A whole lot on the writing of that. And, you know, basically the history books testify to the same thing, that there was great persecution throughout the history of the church, right? Of course, we know that the Catholic Church didn't even happen until at least 300 years after the death, the burial, and resurrection of Jesus Christ. So these things were before the Catholic Church actually happened. So you had historians like Josephus and others who were not Catholic, who were not Christians, that were actually writing about Christian history. And so some of that is what we tap into, like this with 64 AD being Nero, the Roman emperor. That was well-known history of what was going on to the Christians. Did you have a hand up?
I was just going to say, when I was at Southwestern, we had a class on the other religions and stuff, and one of the things they did stress about the Catholic, and it was pathetic about them.
Yeah, absolutely. 300 AD was about a paragraph. You know, and that's when the Catholic Church split off from the true church and became their own entity. Remember, people say that all the time, that the Catholic Church was the first church. It can't be. Not when it came in about 300 AD. That means the church had been in existence for nearly 300 years before there was a Catholic Church. And so a lot of people have to understand that in the world history, so you can debunk that lie too. Okay? So don't fall for that one. But anyway, let's get back to some of the history that's in the history books that actually corresponds with what Jesus was talking about in Matthew 24. All right. So one of the most famous ones was 64 AD. The Roman Emperor Nero. He already had a hatred for Christians anyway. And really, when you read between the lines, he was looking for an excuse to try to exterminate the Christian community. Remember, Christians always had a bad reputation. It wasn't fair, but it was, right? So Christians were always persecuted by two groups specifically, being the Jews and also the Gentiles. And why do you think that the Gentiles were, the non-Jews that is, were persecuting Christians? What do you think the reason was behind that? Jewish, it's very easy, but why do you think non-Jews were persecuted the church so much, like the Romans were non-Jews? Why do you think? What type of religion did they have? Give you a hint. They were pagans. Have you heard of pagans? Mm-hmm. That is, they were worshiping everything under the sun. They had and I'm using small g, they had a god for this, a god for that. You know, just like you have the Greek pantheon, you have the Roman pantheon, which was basically an adaptation of what the Greeks were. Because I know you've heard of Greek mythology, right? Mm-hmm. You had a god for this, a god for that, a god for this, a god for that. The Romans were doing the same thing, even to the point of calling their own emperor a god. Okay? And so that's why you had so much persecution, because Christianity was saying what? There is one God, and that's all we're going to worship. And then when the Roman emperor imposes himself upon you that you have to worship, that was already a what? A smack in the face of the Christian community. And those that would not comply, what would happen to them? They'd be killed or jailed or tortured. Because why? They were going against the Roman authority. See, remember, and this is one of the reasons why you have what's called separation of church and state in America. Because why? At some point, the government was the Catholic Church. And at some point after that, America don't even think about this, the Church of England ran America at first. You realize that, right? When we were still a British colony, you had to go by what? This parish, that parish. Parish basically meant what part of the Church of England you were a part of. And so they did the same exact thing as the Catholic Church. And so after the American Revolution against the British, then what do you get in the Constitution? Separation of what? Church and state. So that's the history and why America is what it is in regards to the separation of church and state, because they went through the era of the Catholic Church running things. They went through the era of the English church, or also known as the Anglican church, running things, right? And so you come up with a whole lot of nonsense with that. But anyway, I mean, we've come down to our time, but at the same time, that was the conditions that the Christians were under at that time. That's why they were persecuted. So if they weren't being persecuted by the Jews, they were being persecuted by the Gentiles. The Bible often calls them what? Greeks. You know, a lot of the same thing. All right. So again, that brings us into 64 AD, which is the most famous. There's so many outside of the Bible source you can go to that actually talks about the Christian persecution that they went through after the death, the burial, and the resurrection of Jesus Christ. But again, going back to Nero, he falsely accused Christians of starting a fire that devastated a lot of Rome. And so what would that do? That would unleash the lions on them. You know what I mean? They had a bad reputation. These people are not worthy to live. These people are not worthy of being independent. Throw them in jail. All those type of things as justification for the so-called fire that they set. And of course, that's controversial because obviously you have argument that they didn't do anything. It was just Nero's paranoia and his abuse of power that was there in order to kill Christians. So he was successful. He rounded up many Christians and had them killed. And some of the things that you have, which you probably can't even fathom today or even think about, that is well documented, that many of the murders that he did, he used Christians as human torches. And I'm not talking about after they're dead. In other words, he set them on fire and let them stay that way. That's why they were called what? Human torches, because of what? Their religion. Okay? Their religion. Now that's some serious hard times that you have to go through. That's why Jesus can say in Revelation 2 verse number 10, because these things were happening or would happen. That's why he said what? Be thou faithful unto death, and I will what? Give thee a crown of life. And he really was referring to these situations right there, because many Christians of the time were becoming martyrs. The word that we like to say. In other words, they were dying because of and for their faith. Okay, so he's one of the examples there. The other one is that sometimes they would just sick the dogs on them and let the dogs rip them from limb to limb because they were Christians. That's some brutal stuff. And that's not the half of it, but that's just one of the famous persecutions under the Emperor Nero. All right, also, you know, you just keep going down. We just don't have the time, because really we could probably spend a month of Sundays or even a year just talking about the different emperors and what they did in the Roman Empire. Because remember, Bible times was under the Roman Empire, right? They were in complete control, and they were tyrants, and to say the least. All right, so emperor after emperor came up with more and more ways to persecute the Christian community according to the history books, resulting in imprisonment, torture, and many times capital punishment, meaning death, because of their faith. Okay? All right, makes sense to you? All right, any questions or comments? Well, the first thing that hits my spirit, of course, that means I don't have any excuse, right? You know, a little throat ache or a little arthritis is not going to stop me from coming to worship, right? Because I don't have to deal with what they had to deal with, right? Theirs was what? Life or death, just for showing up, right? Remember, what was Paul doing? Remember what was Paul doing in Acts chapter number 9? He was going to synagogues and trying to what? Pull Christians out of there, right? And take them what? To prison. That's actually Bible document. So you know that was actually true, right? That's why the church didn't trust he was a disciple after he was converted, right? Because they knew his reputation. They knew he was part of this stuff that was going on, right? From the Jewish side of things. Okay? So you really, in that situation, the Christians couldn't win for losing, right? As we like to say, right? They're persecuted by the Romans and all the other Greek-speaking people or Latin-speaking people, whatever the case may have been, and the Jews. So they were around all sides. Persecution was around them. Okay? So they were a special people. I really uphold them, you know, for being strong in the faith. Because remember, pain, torture, death was a consequence for many of them. Okay? All right, any questions, comments? All right, if not, we'll keep going. All right, here's some of the other tortures that the Christian community came up with. One of the ones that stood out to me was where they took a piece of metal and they would place the body on the metal alive and put it over coals. So what do you think the body was doing while it was still alive? Literally cooking. Almost like barbecuing somebody. That was a torture that they put the Christian community through. Okay? All right? Some of them, of course, it was being dragged behind a chariot And that wasn't just to hurt somebody, that was to parade them around, to make an example of them. You know, among others. They were dragged behind a chariot. Okay? So you know what that's going to do to a body, right? It's going to mutilate it. Right? As it goes through the streets of Rome. Okay? All right? Sometimes, and this was real cruel, they would remove the skin piece by piece until the person died. Now you tell me that's not torture. Piece by piece, just like filleting a person. That's the kind of stuff that's documented that the Christian community had to go through. It's getting kind of gross for you. Not meant to be, I'm just telling you the truth of what's documented out there in history books of the type of torture that they were putting the Christian community through. Of course, crucifixion was well known. You know, they constantly crucified people. You know, obviously, Jesus wasn't the only one crucified. That was a typical Roman execution style for people that they wanted to get rid of. They literally crucified. And remember, that took hours for somebody to die. Okay? So that was actually what? Slow death. All of this is torture. All of this is slow death. Right? So that's probably why America also put in, don't have any cruel and unusual punishments too. Because think about it. We're descendants of all this stuff. You know, our knowledge, think about how the world's knowledge has circulated from us. We're nothing but a synthesis, or what do you call it? A combination of Egyptian, Greek, and what? Roman knowledge. Okay? Look at the houses around the South. You ever understood what Southern architecture really is? We have the big poles in the front. You know where that came from? It's Greco-Roman architecture is what they call it, right? That means what? The Greeks and the Romans passed it down to us. They didn't just pass down, you know, architecture. They passed down brutality too. And that's why we had to have protections among the government, so we didn't have these type of things going on in America. Okay?
That's why I didn't like those type of houses.
What's happening?
I said, that's one of the reasons I didn't like those type of houses, thinking of slavery.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, Greco-Roman. Yeah, and of course, Romans were probably the biggest enslavers of them all, of all time. Because remember, their slavery wasn't based on race or color. They got everybody from everywhere. I think, I don't remember what the numbers was. It was either 1 in 3 people in the Roman Empire, if I'm not mistaken, from my old research, were slaves in Rome. That's a lot. You know, every third person is a slave in the Roman Empire. These folks didn't care nothing about human rights. Human rights violation, what was that? That wasn't in their vocabulary back then. They didn't care at all. At all. All right? The other one they would do was boil folks to death. They would do that. Put them in a big cauldron, a big pot, and they would literally boil folks to death. I'm talking about Christians. Okay, this is what our I don't know how you call it, but the first century church went through. Okay? All right? Starvation, of course, that was common, and many, many more. You know, there's not enough time to go through all the ways they torture people for their faith. So for me, that doesn't gross me out. What that does, that motivates me. I said, okay, you got a little head cold, so what? That don't mean anything compared to the way these folks suffer. That's not going to stop me from worshiping God, praising God, not being ashamed of Him. If these folks will go through all this, I know He's worth it. Okay? I know He's worth it. All right, any other questions or comments on that? Feel free.
I remember hearing Brother Beverly was our history teacher. He really was good. He reminded me of some of the things he can say. But they would also put him in the arena to fight against the best person.
Yeah.
And they just stood there and let them kill him. You know, they didn't fight back. It was torture.
I've seen some depictions of that. You know, where they would put, like me in the ring right now. But the other guy would be a full gladiator, armor and, you know, sword and all that. What am I going to do with this? And he's got armor on. All that. Or what am I going to do if you put me out there and just unleash the lions on me? That was actually entertainment for them. Think about this. What do they often call, and this is again Greco-Roman stuff passed down to American culture. What do they call often when you have arenas? What do they often call them? You know what they call them? Coliseums. Colosseum. What do you think the Roman Colosseum was, right? It was a place to show this stuff off. It was their entertainment. It was their Friday nights to go and see somebody ripped limb from limb in the Colosseum. Anybody that was hated in society, they put them there. Okay? And of course, if Christians are hated in society, guess what they were? Food for the lions or gladiators. They would, overmatch them, all that kind of stuff, so that they would see their death. Okay? All right? They didn't just want to see a victory, they want to see death, blood. That's how vicious the Romans were. Okay? All right? And I told you about how their army operated, right? If their army lost, then they would line them up and they would kill every third person as well. So they expected victory. So it was victory or death, literally, at any time and anything that the Romans touched. Okay? All right, think about that. This goes back, and this gives you a context of Acts. You remember the Roman jailer? Remember when the people were going to escape, he was going to kill himself? Why do you think he would have killed himself? Because he didn't want to go through this stuff. He would have been punished severely, tortured, and lost his life. Because what? His superiors would have done something to him. Okay? So that's why that man was so distressed when God opened the jails and Paul and them could have left. Okay? All right? Any other questions or comments? Feel free. Very good. Very good. Aren't you thankful you live in the time that you live in? Now don't say this stuff can't happen again. Because it can. It can. I hate to say this, but can I? Look how lawless our government is becoming. Who is really paying attention to the law in the White House right now? Nobody. Nobody. I don't care what political affiliation you are. Everybody's being lawless. And when that becomes a rule, who cares about the Constitution? I'm talking about the attitude people get, right? When they start doing this kind of stuff, right? That stuff can happen. The society, as we talked about last time, in the last days, God said what? Basically, I'm paraphrasing, that morals are going to deteriorate. Okay? You see that all the time. And that can start at the top. You don't have to just be here on the street level with us. That can be in the White House. That can be in Congress, so forth and so on. And so we go back to these kind of things. Don't think it won't happen or it can't happen. It can. Okay? All right. Any other questions or comments? Yes, ma'am.
I always think like when we were fighting when they were fighting for civil rights and how people will just leave it being murdered in the streets, having dogs and so on. So I do it is possible. Like that was 50 years ago.
Not that long ago. You think about it because you're basically in my age group. That was our parents. That's not very far ago at all, right? It's interesting when we say that. I hate to get on political stance, but we in a post-racial society. Yeah, right. Yeah, right. And the civil rights movement was what? Just a few years ago, really. If you think about the grand scheme of things, right? Ain't that long ago, has it been? Not in form or fashion. All right. Any questions, comments? Feel free. Feel free. I'm trying to keep from getting on political stance, y'all. Stay with the files. All right. All right. If it'll cooperate with me. So I'm not using my computer. All right. Did it go up? Yeah. Okay. All right. Somebody read Matthew 24, verse 13. Now, this sets the stage. These are the times in which the first century church is operating, and Jesus is foretelling what happened before it happened, okay? So we're going back to Matthew 24, verse 13. This is before all this was happening. It was still happening, but I'm talking about on a different level, all right? What did Jesus say about these end times that we live in and all that stuff starting to happen? What did he say in Matthew 24, verse 13?
But he that shall endure until the end, the same shall be saved.
Right, right. He knew ahead of time. Remember, this is Jesus speaking, right? That the church would go through this stuff. But what does he still require us to do? He didn't say cower down. He didn't say save your life because the emperor wants to murder you and you won't worship him, right? He said what? Still be what? Endure it. Endure it. Remember Revelation chapter 2, verse 10, we don't talk about the first part of that verse. He said, some of you the devil's going to throw into prison. Right? Then he says what? Be thou faithful unto death, and I will give thee a what? A crown of life, right? And so obviously then, these are the type of things he was preparing the church for. In Matthew 24, verse 13, he knew after he was gone that all this stuff would occur. And think about it. He had to know what he's talking about because it happened to him first. Right? Wasn't he crucified? Right? What did he tell the apostles? He said the servant is not above their master. Right? In other words, if they have persecuted me, they're going to what? Persecute you. That applied to them, and it applies to us. And so that's why I get so angry, with TV preaching. If Jesus had to suffer, I got to expect some suffering sometime too. Because I'm not above Jesus, right? And so you can't have a one-sided ministry saying everything gonna be perfect. Jesus didn't say everything's gonna be perfect here on earth. Why would he have to say this if everything's gonna be perfect? Endure unto the end. Endure what? Prosperity? That ain't the context. He said what? Persecution. It's the other P word, right? Sometimes there's gonna be prosperity, but other times there's gonna be what? Persecution. You got to endure all that, what? Until the end. And the same shall be what? Saved, right? Revelation talks a lot about the vengeance that God is going to take on folks that persecute his church, right? Of course. That's why Jesus, Holy Spirit through John, not John, said that. Peter said what? Vengeance is mine, I shall what? Repay, saith the Lord. Why, Lord? Because all this stuff is going to happen to the church, and he's going to repay it. Okay? All right? It makes sense to you. All right? So that's the wrath of God. The wrath of God is actually part of repaying folk for what he did to the church. They did to the church. Okay? Throughout time. Okay? Makes any sense to you? All right. Any questions or comments before we move on? All right. Let's move then. All right. Let's go down to the next verse. Now remember, we're just going down the chapter. These are the things that are going to happen before the end of the world. Okay? That's the context. That's the question being answered. What is going to be the signs of your coming? In other words, what's going to be the last era of man? Which we're in now, right? Because all this stuff is already happening, right? All right? So what does he say in Matthew 24, verse 14? Somebody read that for me, please.
And this gospel of the kingdom shall be preached in all the world for a witness unto all nations, and then shall the end come.
Okay, now remember he started off earlier. There's going to be wars and rumors of wars and all that kind of stuff. What did he say that would be? Remember that verse? The beginning of sorrows. Remember? He said the beginning of sorrows, but what did he say is the end? What is the true end of the world? What does the Bible say the true end of the world is? What did it just say? That's when the world is going to end. You get it? So don't be on watching TV so much. We're going to end because this happening. We're going to end because now we're in Syria. We're going to end because we think he's going to build another temple in Jerusalem. No, he didn't say that. That's premillennialism. But that ain't truth. There's a difference between premillennialism, we already discussed that, right? And the truth. This already kills premillennialism. Because why? When did Jesus say the end of the world is going to happen? When the gospel has gone throughout the entire world, God is satisfied about it being preached everywhere, then God is going to pull the plug, if you will, and that's going to be the end of the world. That is the end. Think about how fair that is. Isn't that fair? What God is actually doing, he's trying to give more and more people an opportunity to be saved, so he gives them more time, right? And then when he says, my work is done, in so many words, right, of spreading the gospel, in other words, you can be saved through Jesus, then that's when he's going to what? 2 Peter chapter number 3, right? That's when he's going to destroy the earth and all that kind of stuff, right? And then the judgment day is going to start. Okay? That makes sense to you? So don't get so antsy when things happen, right? Because you don't know when the end of the world is. Nobody does, right? But one of the signs is what? The gospel will be preached what? In all the world. For a witness unto what? All nations. Everybody will have a chance, okay? Right? And then shall what? End comes. Keep that under your belt. Okay? Keep that in your mind. That's the time that when God is going to end all things. So again, don't worry about nuclear war. People are going to say, oh, that's going to end the planet. Climate change is going to end the planet. No, it's not. No, it's not. I'm all for making the environment right. But I know it's not going to end the world. Because what did God say going to end the world? The gospel has to be what? Preached everywhere in all nations before that happens, okay? All right? Because I don't know about you, but some of you folks grew up with that, didn't you? You had to go do your nuclear drills in school and all that kind of stuff? Or know where the bomb shelter would be and all that, right? Because why? People were scared the nuclear war would end the world, right? Oh, see, she laughed because she went through it, right? We laughed now because what, the 50s? The 60s, right? Mm-hmm. But did it end the world? No. No. I'm not saying there won't be massive killing. Yes, it will. Yes, it will. Some places may get wiped out. Of course, that can happen. But it can't end things. You see, I have to look at it this way. This is a silly way of explaining it. But even if there was nuclear war on Earth, it would be like trying to get rid of roaches. You can't get rid of every roach on the world. You know what? Think about that now. Don't act like you're too bougie, you don't know what I'm talking about, right? Roaches can live through anything, can't they? I'm talking about a race or a species or something. Roach can live through anything. So can people. So can people, right? So in other words, if there's nuclear war, somebody's going to survive. Might be a whole lot of folk wiped out, but somebody's going to survive, right? If the gospel has not been preached everywhere. Okay, we might have 3 years, I don't know, but somebody, you know what? Somebody, it will. It will. All right? So don't fear that. Don't fear that that's going to end the world, because it's not. Genocide is not going to end the world either. You know what was the most famous act of genocide was what? Hitler and the Jews, right? They still survived. They still survived. I mean, Rwanda. I mean, you can talk about a whole lot of different places that genocide has happened, but they were never wiped out, right? That's not going to be the end of the world. Yes, ma'am.
They made a movie. I can't remember what it was with Denzel Washington, where it was like it was nuclear.
The book of Eli.
Yes, yeah. But they were still trying to destroy the Bible. But his mission was, for them to stay there. But he read it so much that they were saying that he had knowledge of it, to read out. But that made me think of it, that it was like it was nuclear and all of that. But they were trying to destroy the word. And they still could.
You never will be able to destroy the word. Heaven and earth will pass away, but my word will not pass away, Jesus says. Yeah, so obviously then, this stuff is on so many people's minds, you could make movies out of it, right? Book of Eli is one example. It's fictional, but you get where I'm coming from, right? Family's not going to wipe everybody out. It may destroy many populations, but it's not going to wipe everybody out, right? Disease is not going to do it. We always worry about the next super disease, right? It may wipe out a whole lot of folk, but it's not going to wipe out everybody. Because again, if God wanted to live, they're going to live, right? You ever talk about global warming, right? I care about that. Don't get me wrong. That kind of thing, but it's not going to kill everybody. Remember, only when God is done distributing the gospel will the world end. That's what the Bible teaching. We know we serve a God that cannot lie, right? And so if that's what he says in the world's going to be, that's what it's going to be no matter what man does. Okay? Pollution, none of that can eliminate all of us. Okay? It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. All right, any questions or comments on that? All right, now we'll move on. All right. Now, remember now, this is just repetition. You've already studied all these two groupings of verses. The judgment day will commence when Jesus returns. Okay? Obviously we know that. That's elementary. That's milk. And Jesus remained in heaven in order that more can be saved. We studied that, right? 2 Peter chapter 3. Verse 3 to verse number 14. So when Jesus comes back, that's going to be the end of all of it, right? That's after the word of God has gone throughout the entire planet. Okay? All right, any other questions? That's pretty elementary. But I'm trying to get it where we can put two and two together, right? Put it all together. All right. Go ahead, brother. Let me see your hand.
One thing that I find amazing that people talk about the end of the world, like so my sister was telling me that Sunday, that look like the end is near. Well, a lot of times people say that, but you have a lot of people saying that, but still they're not don't seem to be making any more preparation towards that. People are still people are getting further and further away from God, rather than getting closer. If you think the end is near, it seems like people would be working to preparing for that day.
Absolutely.
But it seems people just don't seem to care. But one thing is certain, whether it's the end of the world or the end of your life, we know that the end of the lives are getting closer and closer.
Absolutely.
The older you get, the closer you are to your latest day.
Absolutely.
Everybody knows that. At my age, I know I don't expect to be here as long as I've been here. So you need to be trying to make preparation to, for that final day.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Because the final day could be just your day. Well, it's the end of the world or not. I like the way that summarized it, right? Because we have to obey the gospel while we're still alive on this side of life. Again, because why? We don't see any opportunity to be saved anywhere in the Bible outside of this lifetime that we're in right now. Very good. All right. Now, this is how you rightly divide the Bible. When you continue to read Matthew 24, verses 15 to 22 is answering question 1 that Jesus was asked, right? When shall these things be? In other words, he was talking about what? Tearing down the temple. So he's talking about the physical destruction of Jerusalem before it happened, right? So now make sure you have your mental outline in your head. So when you start studying Matthew 24, verse 15 and 22, we're not talking about when Jesus comes back. We're talking about 70 AD. We're talking about the Roman invasion of Jerusalem and destruction of it. Okay? So if you don't remember that as you study it, you'll come up with premillennialism. You'll come up with all kind of false doctrine. Because you took Matthew 24, verse 15 and 22 out of its context. Okay? That makes sense? Okay, so you got to know the background of Matthew 24, 15 and 22 before you read it. All right? That's probably the best way of saying it. So that is the Roman invasion of Jerusalem in 70 AD because of their sins. Okay? We obviously know that has happened. We don't even need a history book to know that happened, right? All you got to do is look at Jerusalem today. Is the temple still there? No, it's in ruins, isn't it? Right? And so that was actually the proof that Matthew 24 is the Word of God. In other words, Jesus foretold the destruction of Jerusalem before it happened, right? So Jesus, by the time 70 AD was gone, Jesus had suffered, died, and rose again, and is in heaven for decades at that point, right? So he was able, through his divine nature, to prophesy, in other words, tell the future of what was going to happen to the Jewish people before it did. And that's what Matthew 24 is saying. He is foretelling the Roman invasion of Jerusalem. Okay? Which again occurred what year? History books record 70 AD. 70 AD. Okay? Alright. And the other part of what he was doing, now that's how good a leader he is that he also told them how to save themselves from the destruction of the Roman invasion. Okay? Before it happened. Okay? Alright, that makes sense to you? Alright, let's see if we can make some more ground before our time's up. Alright. Let's read Matthew 24, verse 15. Now, if you understand that these verses are talking about the Roman invasions, it's a lot easier to understand what he's talking about. Okay? All right, somebody read Matthew 24, verse 15, please.
When ye therefore shall see the abomination of the desolation spoken of Daniel the prophet stand in the holy place, whoso readeth with him understanding.
Okay. All right. So, when you read the book of Daniel, and typically, there's no disagreement among scholars of what the book of Daniel is talking about. When you had that statue with Nebuchadnezzar, remember that was talking about the world empires that were to come, wasn't it? And we were talking about what? Babylon, the Medo-Persian Empire. You're talking about the Greeks, and then you were talking about the Romans. Now, if Daniel was talking about these world kingdoms to come, remember Daniel lived centuries before all this happened. Then if Jesus is quoting Daniel, what is he talking about? What Daniel was talking about. He was talking about a world kingdom that would come and crush the Jews. Okay? So remember, you can't make Daniel contradict Matthew. Otherwise, it didn't come from the same Holy Spirit, right? All scripture is given by what? The inspiration of God. And so that means scripture has to harmonize. So if Jesus is talking about what would happen in the last days of man, and Daniel was talking about what happens in the last day of man, that means they have to be equal. They have to be saying the same thing. Okay? That makes sense to you? All right, now you see how you stay on the straight and narrow in interpreting the Bible, right? Anytime you deviate from that scriptural harmony, you come up with nonsense like the Left Behind series. You know, that kind of nonsense. Okay? All right. Any questions or comments so far? Let's make sure we're still there. Going slow on purpose because you can get lost in this real quick. Okay? All right. Okay, so what does Matthew 24, verse 15 says? Remember, it has to coordinate with what Daniel had already taught centuries before Jesus uttered these words. Okay, somebody read that for me, please. Yeah, verse 15. Yeah, read it again.
When ye therefore shall see the abomination of desolation.
Okay, stop there. The abomination of desolation. What do you think that means? Remember, Jesus is talking about the future at that point, right? Meaning after he lived but before we live. Okay? So he said, what is he saying? When ye therefore shall see means what? It didn't happen yet. It was about to come. So he nicknamed some folks abomination of desolation. Okay? They were ungodly in their ways, abomination. They were great idol worshippers. Okay? Desolation means what? Ones that come to destroy. So they were ungodly people coming to destroy. Okay? Abomination of desolation spoken of by what? Daniel the prophet, so he's referencing the book of Daniel. Okay? Stand in the what? Holy place. What's the holy place? The temple. The temple. Okay? Are we going back to the first two verses where he said what? The temple was going to be what? Torn down. So that's why you know Jesus is talking about the physical destruction of Jerusalem. And so was Daniel. Okay? Makes sense. Before it happened in 70 AD. Okay? Stand in the holy place. Who what? Whoso readeth, let him what? Understand. Okay? Still making sense to you? Okay. All right. If you need additional knowledge of what the abomination of desolation actually is, because people will make it up to mean anything under the sun. Jesus defined it later. Look at Luke 21, verse 20. Somebody read what the abomination of desolation is. He told us it in Luke 21, verse 20. Somebody read that.
And when ye shall see Jerusalem compassed with armies, then know that the desolation thereof is not.
Same word, desolation. Abomination of desolation, right? So that means Luke 21 and Matthew 24 must be talking about the same thing, right? And then he said, he's talking in the future tense again, right? When ye shall what? See what? And 24 was the holy place, and what is this now? Jerusalem. The holy place is where? In Jerusalem. Correct. Correct. And so again, what do you have? You have what? Scriptural harmony, right? Okay? That means you're interpreting it correctly. Okay? And when ye shall see Jerusalem compassed with what? The abomination of desolation is called a what? Called armies. And what army destroyed Jerusalem? 70 AD. What army destroyed it?
Romans.
The Romans. So that's how you know Matthew 24 is talking about who? The Romans. So that's Matthew 24 verse 15 on down. The chapter is talking about is an event that already happened. Not something that is going to happen like they try to talk about on TV and sell books and movies about it to make money. Do you see the lie already? Of course. That's why you what? Study scripture upon scripture. That's why when you study Matthew, you also study Mark and Luke and John. Because why? It unlocks your knowledge. They are the keys to each other. Okay? That's why Jesus, when you talk about the parables, that's why you understand what? The parable of the seed and sower makes you understand the rest of the parables. Because he uses the same symbols throughout them. Same thing with the second coming, the last days and all that. Jesus talks about the same thing through Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. And you use them to what? Decode what he's saying. Okay? All right, any questions, comments? Feel free. You see it? All right. All right. And when ye shall see Jerusalem compassed with what? Armies. And it's already been identified by who that army was. The Romans. Okay? An event that has already happened. Not what we're waiting for to happen. Okay? All right? Then know that the desolation thereof is what? Nigh or close. Right? So what is he doing? Remember, the reason why he's telling his community this, Christian community this, is what? He's trying to protect them. So when the Romans start coming to Jerusalem, remember he's talking about this before it happened, right? He's saying, know how to protect yourself. They are about to destroy Jerusalem. And when you go down the chapter, he's saying, get out of it while you can. That's what he's saying. Okay? So he's protecting the physical well-being of the church, is what he's doing. Okay? All right. Any questions or comments on that? You got it? All right. Let's continue. Now you won't go for all those fanciful stories on television, will you? All right. Matthew 24, verse 16. You just study the Bible. It's simple. It's not hard. 24 verse 16. So now he's talking about when the destruction of Jerusalem was coming, right? What do you do, church? That's what he said. 24 verse 16. Somebody read that for me, please.
Then let them which be in Judea flee into the mountains.
Okay, so what did he say? Get out of here. Right. Don't just let yourself be slaughtered by the Romans. The Romans are there to punish the Jews for their sins. You folks are forgiven. Don't get caught up in that. Get out of there when you can. When you see them starting to come, flee, run to where? The mountains, where there's going to be protection physically for you. Okay? So we give them a plan to save the church. Okay? During the what? The Roman invasion that already happened. Okay. All right. Any questions or comments so far? You still got it? All right. Now he's going to tell them some more stuff about saving themselves from the Romans. All right. Well, I don't think we'll get there yet. We'll have to do that next time. What I'm going to reference now is Daniel chapter 9 quickly. All right. So Daniel also talked about the same thing. The book of Daniel. Daniel foretold the destruction of Jerusalem hundreds of years before it happened in 70 AD, just like Jesus did. Okay? He saw the days of Jesus on the earth and the destruction of Jerusalem shortly after Jesus' crucifixion. So Daniel was foretelling all this happening before even Jesus was born on the earth. Okay? All right? That's how powerful God's word is. All right? All right. Here's what Daniel foretold. Actually, I want you to read it so you see it for yourself. Read somebody quickly. Read Daniel 9, 24 to 27. Because we'll end right here. Daniel chapter 9, verse 24 to 27. Somebody read that in here.
70 weeks
are determined upon thy people and upon thy holy city, to finish the transgressions, and to make an end of sins, and to make reconciliation for iniquity, and to bring in everlasting righteousness, and to seal up the vision and prophecy, and to anoint the most holy. Know therefore and understand that from the going forth of the commandment to restore and to build Jerusalem until the Messiah the Prince shall be 7 weeks, and 62 weeks. The street shall be built again, and the wall even troubleless times. And after 62 weeks shall Messiah be cut off, but not for himself, and the people of the Prince that shall come shall destroy the city and the sanctuary. And the end therefore shall be with a flood, and unto the end of the war desolation are determined.
Keep hearing that word desolation, don't you?
And he shall confirm the covenant with many for 1 week, and in the midst of the week he shall cause the sacrifice and oblation to cease, and for the overspreading of abominations he shall make it desolate, even unto the consummation, and that determined shall be poured unto the desolate.
All right. Okay. So you start hearing the same words, don't you? And you start hearing Bible harmony, you know, scriptural harmony, yes. And remember, Daniel was written hundreds of years before Jesus was born on the earth. And Daniel also foretold the same thing that would happen to Jerusalem. Okay? Now, I don't get into the calculations, you know, 80 and all that kind of stuff. In other words, he was getting in time frames when it would happen from his time going forward. Okay? We don't even have to calculate because we already know what happened. Right? All right, so I don't get into that. A lot of scholars get caught up in that, and I don't do a lot of that right now because it already happened. What's the point? You know? All right, but anyway, let's hit the main points that Daniel pointed out that harmonizes with Matthew 24. Okay? All right. Daniel said that in those days when the Messiah comes, which is also known as the what? The Christ, the Son of God, right? Who we know was who? Jesus. So I'm just going to say Jesus. Okay? All right? So Daniel foretold that the end of sins would come when Jesus' death happened. Okay? And that being the way of forgiveness of sin is what it means by that. When it says the end of sins, meaning what? The forgiveness man would get of his sins, right? Sin would no longer reign over us because why? God was going to send a Savior to die for us so that we don't have to pay for our sins. That's what Daniel is saying. Okay? All right? Remember, this is way before Jesus came to the earth that God revealed that to Daniel through the Holy Spirit. Okay? All right? He also foretold what? Restoration of peace with God, right? Because we know sin separates man from God, right? Isaiah 59 verse 2, 1 Peter 3 verse number 12 say what? Sin separates us from God. But when Christ's blood was shed, it ended sin for us, right? I'm talking about that which is held against us. And so what does that do? That brings us back at peace with God, right? Daniel foretold that that moment would come for all baptized believers, right? All right? The righteousness, true righteousness that is, will be brought into the world by whose teaching? Jesus' teaching. He's the only one who can teach it to be right because he was perfect in all things, right? Hebrews 4:14 and verse number 16. So if he was perfect, he can teach us how to be perfect, right? How to be righteous in the sight of God. That's what that is talking about, okay? All right. Trying to get some real quick. All right. He also talked about the sealing of vision and prophecy, which is the Bible's way of saying that Jesus will fulfill all the Old Testament. I call it predictions concerning the Savior. That's what that means. Okay? So Messiah would be somebody that will fulfill everything said about the Savior from Genesis all the way to Malachi. All the Old Testament that talks about what the Savior is going to be. Daniel was saying there's going to be one that comes that fulfill every last one of those prophecies. Okay? All right? And of course he said what? Jesus will be anointed that he is by God, which means appointed as the Messiah, right? What did he say when Jesus was baptized by John the Baptist? This is my beloved son, and what? In whom I'm well pleased. Correct. Okay? So his voice right there testified of who Jesus was. Okay? All of this stuff foretold by Daniel long before Jesus ever set one foot on the planet in the flesh. Okay? All right? He also foretold, in those verses we just read, the Messiah, meaning the Savior, would be killed. Okay? That's why it should be impossible for anybody Jewish to not accept Jesus. Okay? It should be absolutely impossible, because the scriptures they've always had in their hands scream Jesus is the Messiah. Okay? Daniel said it bluntly that he would be killed. Okay? The psalmist in chapter number 22 said he would be crucified. I'm talking about all the stuff in the Old Testament before Jesus was even born on the planet. Isaiah 53 said what? He would die for our iniquities. Right? It should be literally impossible as a true believer in the Old Testament, as a Jewish person, to say Jesus is not the Messiah. He fulfilled everything all the prophets said, just like Daniel said he would do. Okay? So I remember I told you the story I heard on the radio that a guy that said he was converted to Christianity from being a Jew. He said the quote-unquote rabbi told him don't read Isaiah 53. Why? He told him not to because he knew it led to Jesus. Okay, then he can't read Daniel either. You got to skip that one, right? Huh? You got to skip all the Psalms. By the time you get that, the Old Testament looked like Swiss cheese. You couldn't read anything. Could you? If that's the idea that they try to use. Because they know they lie. Many of them know they lie. All right? All right, let me get to it. So after the Messiah is killed, going back to Daniel, God would send an army to desolation to what? Destroy Jerusalem and the temple. Same thing Jesus said in Matthew 24, which was fulfilled in 70 AD. You can see the ruins today. Okay? All right? And he also said this. This was powerful too. The Messiah will bring in the new covenant, which is the what? New Testament. So he also be a new lawgiver for God's people, for them to what? Obey him for salvation. Okay? Just like they had to with Moses prior to the Christian era. Okay? All right. Any other questions or comments? That's all I got prepared for you tonight. I think that's deep enough, isn't it? There's a lot to it. A lot to it. We'll continue to go through Matthew 24, probably all the way to the end, because you have to understand that properly to understand the difference between what? The destruction of Jerusalem, the end of times, which are today until Jesus comes back, right? And the second coming. If you can't keep them straight, you'll get all messed up real quick. All right, one more last chance. Any other questions or comments before we end here tonight? All right, if not, can one of the brothers lead us in a song, and we'll get everybody out here at this appropriate time. God bless you. Good class.
Holy
Spirit.